Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Week in Horror After Dark Front Row. Yes, this is the special where we sit down and talk with professionals that work in the industry and get their take on not only the industry itself, but the genre we all love so much, the horror genre, and the work they've done in it. And today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Russell Coker. How you doing, sir?
Great, awesome. It feels like almost a year since the last time we chatted. Are you doing the Face of Horror contest this year? Are you
Not this
Yeah.
year. Yeah,
Okay,
not.
yeah.
I had the experience last year was fun, and I know
Mhm.
that both. I know we both made the semis, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess we could let the people know how we started out as adversaries, and here we are as friends. Yeah, it was. I remember I kind of learned my lesson. I don't quite have the millions of followers that you and the winners obviously have. But so we started out. We basically met through Faces of Horror. I just remember seeing it randomly on Instagram. I'm like, oh, that looks cool. Not realizing that everyone on the internet and beyond also thought the same thing. It was like, oh, sure, I'll do that. Um, Initially, my plan was like, oh, I'll just like outwork everyone. So I basically ended up just manually spamming everyone I know on Facebook and Instagram for
Yes.
like basically 2 months. And then I think I got through, what was it, maybe round four. I don't remember how many rounds there were. But then I basically got to the point where like it wasn't enough to just be able to manually spam people. And
Right.
then because then I saw you were on, we were in the same group, and I'm like, who's this guy? And then I'm like, oh no. And then you had like three podcasts and everything. I'm like, oh shit. And so I was just like trying, and then I jumped on and tried to troll you that one last
Yes,
podcast.
yes. I
No,
remember that when
don't
you.
vote for him, vote for me. And you won. That's fair. And then who was it? Because I remember there was like some nurse. It was like the three of us, and at one point she was in the lead. I'm like, oh man, how? Who is this person who doesn't have any? It was just someone who liked horror but didn't have any like IMDb credits or any podcasts or anything. I'm
Right.
like, what? And then you pulled out ahead at the last minute. It was just like neck and neck. I'm just like me, and then her, and she was up for a while, and then you came out at the end. And I'm like, all right, well, at least, the guy who's doing this for a living is, in the lead. And then I think after you, some TikTok guy was in the lead for a while. And then
That's
after
right.
that,
Yeah.
I remember someone who did like horror cabaret or something ended up winning, but I still don't know. I haven't heard any release about the actual movie, so I'm a little bit like, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see someday, but I don't know what the name of the movie's called. Or have you heard anything about like what ended up happening?
Yeah. So, because I followed up a little bit, and I'm a big fan of Rue Morgue, so I was wondering. It was like, okay, now that it's all over and done with, and I know that,
Mm,
and the girl, and I actually like spoke briefly with the girl who actually
mm,
won before they did the final. Once we were knocked out, because I
yeah.
think we were in the same round, then you got knocked out, and then I got knocked out in the next round, and there was the two that were like up there in the lead. The big ones were, you mentioned the TikTok guy. He's actually
Mm,
this guy, I think he's in Georgia, and he's a firefighter, and he's also like a
mm,
musician. He's like a goth musician, and
mm,
so he had that going for him. And then he's also like ex-military. He's got a big following there.
yeah.
And then you had the girl who is the cabaret star, and like
Mm,
she does like cabaret and burlesque, like horror themed cabaret and
yeah.
burlesque. And so she wound up taking it.
Mm,
Now, from what I understand, that once the Face of Horror contest concluded and she had won, now her photo spread did release in Rue Morgue, so I have
mm,
seen that, like her and Kane Hodder together. So I
yeah.
have seen that photo spread, and they did it up in Philadelphia at the Buffalo Bill House. And as far as I know, she got all the prize that they were talking about. But the dude who's in charge of the film, so like you remember how you could donate, right? Like people could
Yeah.
donate and they get like double votes, stuff like that. All
Mm,
that money, 25% of that money went to the B Plus Foundation. So
Mhm.
all the money they raised, the B Plus Foundation got a quarter, and then they kept 75% of it to cover their administration costs, all the
Mhm.
like the website and all the things they had to pay in the Buffalo
Yep.
Bill House, and it went into the coffers of the production company in order to make their next film. But from
Mhm.
what I've heard, now I can't confirm this 100%, was that the strike occurred,
Oh,
and because those rumblings happened, and it was kind of like and then all of a sudden financing was once there was rumblings of a strike, and then
mhm.
all of a sudden people started like kind of like not wanting to finance, because if you put money into a project and all of a sudden the strike happens,
Oh,
what are you
yeah.
going to do? So then
Got
people started getting a little more finicky with their money, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden the strike took place, and so that's been kind of like put on hold. So
Gotcha.
uh, I don't know. Now I know they're doing it again, and I didn't sign up this year to do it. A
Mhm.
lot of people are asking me, "Are you doing it again?" I was like, "I'm not."
Mhm.
And from what I understand, they're hoping to use this money in order to either finish like that one and from a non-union perspective,
Mhm.
or set up for the next film that they're going to do.
Got
But I do know I'm pretty certain that they haven't shot it yet. So
Mhm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, 'cause I've been seeing the ads recently, and I think it just said, like, photo spread. I didn't say anything about star in a movie or anything, so it seems like I was just like, "Ah, I wonder what's going on there."
yeah,
So,
they offered
yeah.
a like one of the prizes was like a walk on role
Mhm.
in the guy what was his name, Jose. He was doing all
Mhm.
the videos that the
Oh,
like the
yeah.
lead up, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's his production company, and it was going to be the winner of Face of Horror would get a walk on role in his
Yeah.
next feature. But as
Mhm.
far as I know, they haven't shot it yet. So, but they
Yeah.
did do the photo spread at Rumor this
Mhm.
time. I believe this year they're doing it up at the Amityville House in New
Mhm.
York. So I think they're doing that there. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was cool the first time, and I was
Mhm.
intrigued, but it
Yeah.
just got me because it wound up being pay to win, which is
Yeah.
but at least the charity got something out of it.
Yeah, it's kinda like a little bit more like, just a really complicated, like, GoFundMe kinda, or like,
Right? Yeah.
what's the other one? Like, not crowdsource, I'm trying to think. The ones they do all the movie ones, there's a couple that my mind's blanking right now, but they have, like, different, like, donate X amount, and you get this perk, and so it's just like
Oh,
it
like
kinda
in like Kickstarter,
yeah, like
Indiegogo. Yeah.
Kickstarter,
Yeah.
Indiegogo, yeah, where it's just like except for they only basically had one perk. It's like, "All right, everyone, come on, you want this one, you can make it." So, yeah. So, yeah, for me, it I would usually get on there for, like, an hour or 2 every day, and then just, like I'm like, "Let me figure out how to automate this," and then by the end, it was, like, kinda too late because 'cause I'm like, "Alright, my reach isn't quite that big," so, you know. But hey, it was a fun experience. And also the benefit of that, even though I didn't win, is like literally everyone I know knows what I'm all about and what I'm out here doing too. So it was like benefits are like, oh shit, yeah, he's actually going for it. So that was
The networking was great.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I met a number of
Mhm,
other people. I actually got in touch with their production company, and I made some
mhm,
contacts. And
yeah,
as far as this industry goes, that's the key. Is like because it
mhm,
is who you know.
yeah, yeah. So
So you just you okay, so looking at your history in the industry and how you came up
mhm,
in it. So first and foremost, kind of want to like dive into that because I am really curious as to what kind of like when you saw Face of Horror, was it
mhm,
initially did you just like, oh, okay, awesome, I think this is something interesting, something fun to do,
mhm,
or do you have, I mean, is that love that background in horror films, is that
mhm.
what kind of drove you to that, or was just an opportunity?
For me, I like horror movies and stuff like that. I'd say I'm not the most I don't like live and breathe. I'm not the most diehard guy. Like for instance, well, let me ask you this. Oh, and what I mean by that is like I enjoy horror movies, but
Mhm.
some people are very like let me ask you this. What did you think of the last Halloween movie?
Halloween Kills.
Halloween Ends.
Oh, Halloween. Oh, sorry, Halloween Ends. So,
Yeah.
do you have an hour? No, but
Yes.
okay, so on my pod, on here on Week in
Uh,
Horror, my
yeah.
co-host Johnny and I, Johnny
Uh,
O and I, we diverged definitely on this.
uh,
But my take on Halloween Ends was that David Gordon Green
Mhm.
was attempting to do what Rob Zombie did in
Mhm.
his Halloween 2. The
Yeah.
problem was that Rob Zombie's style is a little too frenetic, a little too Hellbilly Deluxe, to
Uh-huh.
give it that kind of speed. And but what he was trying to convey was essentially the generational how generational trauma is passed on from person to person, and how
Mhm.
violence and trauma acts like an infection, that
Yeah.
the actions of one infect the next and then informs their actions, so on and so
Mhm.
forth. And it was like the idea that the evil of Michael Myers spreads like a plague. Now, that's what
Mhm.
Zombie tried to convey, but he did it in a
Yeah.
really weird artistic way with the white
Mhm.
horse and, Laurie's like
Yeah.
connection to Michael. I think David Gordon Green approached it in a much more intellectual way and tried to convey it
Mhm.
like from an intellectual and psychological method. But that is an extremely hard thing to try and convey to
Mhm.
an audience. That would be better in book form. In book
Yeah.
form, that would play really, really well. But visually, that's hard to convey an
Mhm.
internal experience, especially when your titular, the main antagonist is wearing
Mhm.
a mask.
Yeah.
So to see how that can be, how that transfers not only to Laurie but to also to the other characters, Laurie's granddaughter, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And I think he did it better than Zombie, but
Mhm.
ultimately did not hit the target. He got closer, but not quite, and that's
Yeah.
why the film dipped the way it did. It was the
Mhm.
same. It was the same Halloween 2 from Zombies effect. Is that
Mhm.
but people are like, what the shit is this? Whereas this one's like, oh, I see what he's doing, but nah,
Uh,
still doesn't hit right.
yeah.
That's my take.
Okay. Yeah. I think like I thoroughly enjoyed it, but what I because I like when people take a risk and do something different because one of the
Yes.
things I saw with like tons of people got mad, like, oh, well, it was centering too much on this other guy and it wasn't enough about. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool when they're like, instead of just having the same villain come back over and over again, and then it's nothing really changes, like they actually try to make it so this can kind of continue in a way. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Introducing new characters in a franchise to make it different. But I mostly got like on the online. I'm in a few different horror groups. People are like, "Oh no, that's stupid. It wasn't even about the main." It's like, do you really want the same movie repackaged over and over again? And so, like, when I say casual horror enjoyer, what I mean is like I like horror, but I appreciate when people take risks and try to do something
Right.
different as opposed to just same movie over and over again. And it's funny because it seemed like the people who hated that one liked Halloween Kills more. And in my opinion, that was one of the like worst installments. There was like at the end, I counted like it was just getting ridiculous where they they like shot and hit Michael Myers like what was it? I think it was like 16 or 20 times. They shot him, stabbed him, hit him with a 2x4, like hit him with an iron, and then he just got up and started doing kung fu. It was like that one, what was it, Jason X or something, where Busta Rhymes does like kung fu, and it was just like, what are we even watching here at a certain point? It's just like, is this a Marvel movie that where this guy basically is invincible? And that was sort of like the thing where I think these movies can get a little bit stale. It's like, all
Mhm.
right, I guess it's just they're fighting God. Okay, he can't die. He's immortal. Maybe he was born in some industrial waste, which gave him like superpowers. Because there's a little bit, and that's why I appreciate like the Rob Zombie version. He's like a 7 foot tall maniac. It's like, okay, I can see how this guy is invincible. He can probably deadlift like 600 pounds naturally. Like, I get it. I see what he was doing there. He's like making that sort of realism, adding the realism to it.
Mhm.
Because, like the original, it's like, okay, it's just, some guy. It was like kind of grounded in reality, but these things have it's enjoyable to a certain degree where it's like, okay, this is getting a little bit more and more like crazy. But I feel like the difference with um, the Halloween franchise versus, say, I don't know, like Hellraiser or Child's Play. Like with those franchises, the more ridiculous it got, the more comedic it got. Even with like Evil Dead until they did the remakes, it's just like, oh, it starts out more serious, and then you have Army of Darkness, where it's a great movie, but they add in that kind of
Oh,
campy.
they had that tendency to swing into camp in
Yeah,
order to try
yeah.
and try to liven it up a little bit
Mhm,
because
mhm.
you know the kids like obviously I would say the first Child's Play. The Child's
Yeah.
Play franchise is fantastic because it starts
Mhm,
off in that really dark place and
mhm.
there's no levity whatsoever. And
Yeah.
even though even the attempts at levity are like really embedded in like a dark
Mhm.
place. But then once you get past 3 and you get into like Bride of Chucky and Seed
Yeah.
of Chucky and even then the camp just plays into it. So
Mhm.
the Child's Play franchise went there, the Leprechaun franchise went there. Eventually they eventually go camp. They add in a
Yeah.
campy element to kind of alleviate this the because you don't want to like deadline just like one note. You don't
Mhm.
want your franchise to be one note. And
Yeah.
I agree with you that taking risks is
Mhm.
paramount. You have to be willing to try and go in a new direction. Otherwise, we are just telling the same story over
Yeah.
and over and over again. That's why I liked Halloween Kills and Halloween
Mhm.
Ends because I saw where Green and Danny McBride were
Mhm.
going with that, and where Jason Blum, where I saw their vision and where they
Mhm.
wanted to go, and they were willing to put it on the line. They started off with the absolutely brilliant Halloween in 2018, and then followed up with Halloween Kills, which I thought
Mhm.
played like was a good homage to the original one, but they took it in an interesting direction and then they followed it up with trying to do what Zombie did.
Mhm.
I dig parts of Halloween 2, like Zombie's
Mhm.
version, because
Yeah.
I like Rob Zombie's director. You know I
Mhm.
do.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll forgive him for the Munsters and I'll
Mhm.
forgive him for Three from Hell. I will do that because Three from
Mhm.
Hell was just Devil's Rejects remade. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I was always curious because looking at the work that you've done and how you're
Mhm.
coming up in the industry, horror itself. Do you see yourself going forward, like really diving into that? Because
Mhm.
in my eyes, you've got the build, you've got the look, you've got the
Mhm.
intensity that you could go the Kane Hodder route, the Derek Mears
Mhm.
route, the Ken Kersinger route, where you could be one of those I'd say the monster, where you
Mhm.
can portray those. Is that you see yourself going in that direction or more in
Yeah.
a more and a more I would say vocal direct,
Mhm.
standard acting?
I'd say I suppose in the ideal world, both. I have worked on a few projects lately. So there's Gary Shore shot, or they just released the Queen Mary, Haunting of Queen Mary. I'm actually in that. I play a Nazi ghost, so
Nice.
might just be a jump scare, but see if you can see me in that. So I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list of things to watch. I just did a horror short called Disturbance. It's probably going to hit the festival circuit where I play just a demon. There's a demon hunter. So I'm all just blackened and I wear contacts and stuff. And then I tomorrow I'm finishing up a shoot. It's called Tip, where I play um, a group of friends in this restaurant, and then people start dying. So where it's kind of like a murder mystery. It's like a whodunit type of deal. So yeah, I definitely like playing both sides. I definitely kind of enjoy the creature work because you do have to break it down in a way where, like, even if you're playing a monster, it's like, well, who is this monster? Kind of how do they move? Like when I in this movie where I played a demon, I started to think like, okay, like you never really want to go generic, like, oh, it's just a demon from hell. It's like, well, what circle of hell does this demon live in? How do they move? Like, what was their environment before they got summoned? So I was thinking, okay, this demon is completely black. So I just imagine like this demon is probably lives in hell and is stuck in a pile of bodies and basically almost just swims through bodies as it's tortured and being tortured. So I kind of like try to implement that into how I moved, kind of just like slithery, kind of like a snake. So there's interesting ways you can break down characters even if you don't vocalize or necessarily
Right.
have like dialogue. There's still a lot you can do physically in order to like bring characters to life and stuff like that. So I'm definitely into that. One of the things I found out when I did this ad for the Metropolis Department of Water and Power. They were doing like these and maybe I'll send you a link so you can post this if you want to have it in the stream. But this was I got this part before COVID. It was like 2019, and then COVID happened, and I didn't hear anything from the production company because they were basically doing like a comedic run of like, hey, conserve water, basically.
Yeah.
And so then like 2 years later, they're like, hey, remember that thing you auditioned for? You want to come do it? I'm like, yeah. And what I found out was because it was basically a full body suit, they were like, yeah, a lot of people have claustrophobia and they don't know that until they have this full like face, because it wasn't just like this, it was like a full hood and then a full bodysuit, and they're like, yeah, some people have claustrophobia and they don't know until they have the suit on that they can't take it. So it's kind of a big risk for production companies and
Right.
to have people who don't know that they can wear the suits and stuff. So that was a big deal for me. I'm like, okay, I know for a fact, I never thought I was, but this is proof that I can wear like the full body suits and everything. I'm fine with
Nice.
it. So that was cool. It was Jennifer Aspinall. She did makeup for that one. She's been in the game for a while, and then yeah, it was cool. I guess maybe I talk a little bit more about acting in general, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are just like, how do I get in? What do I do? How do I? Because there's kind of a lot of information out there. It can
Yeah.
seem a little bit nebulous, and it really is, to be honest. It's really a lot of it is like training, and then just always like being out there, putting yourself out there, finding gigs and stuff like that. So basically, for me, I went to film school. I came out to LA to go to film school. Before that, I was in San Francisco. I never took my my SATs. So I was just like, okay, I got to do the community college for a year, a couple years. But before that, I was in the military. So after I got out of the military, I'm like, I want to do something the opposite of what I was doing. So I was on the GI Bill. I went to school, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember back in high school, I took some video production class. I'm like, oh, I'll go to school for film. So then eventually I found my way out to LA, went to film school. It was cool. I enjoyed it. It was a lot. I ended up producing two senior thesis films, and at CSU Northridge, it's kind of a big deal. Like their 15-minute shorts end up being like $40,000. So it's like a pretty. They put a lot into it, and you basically get half of that money, and then you have to raise the rest. So I ended up producing a couple. Then after I got out, I was always kind of thought about acting, and people were like, oh, you should get into acting. So I took a year. I studied at UCLA for a year. They have an acting certificate out there, so I did that, and then I got into doing improv at Second City in Hollywood. They're no
Nice.
longer. They're closed now out here. There's a
Cool.
couple of improv. They're still in Chicago and Toronto, and then I was cruising. I got a commercial agent, and then 2019 was pretty good. I was in a Taylor Swift music video playing drums. I got some Gucci ad. Don't know how, but it managed. I'm like, all right, cool. And then COVID hit, and then I worked like one day on a crime recreation show just because I had like a gray four-door sedan, and they needed that for the scene because the guy had one. So I'm like, all right. And then I started doing private coaching with actor named Rodney Roland. He's been in like a million things, X Files, Veronica Mars, and stuff. Because like everything was closed, I was like, you know what? It seems like this Zoom thing is here to stay. So then I did that for about a year, and then I recently got a theatrical agent and a manager, and so basically, so that's kind of a long story short, or long story longer. So basically, for anyone who wants to get into acting, first thing you have to do is train, because honestly, it takes about 5 years to get good. It can take maybe a year or two to become competent, but to like really feel like you have it, you just have to put in the reps. But also, You have to find good teachers, and you really won't know if it's a good teacher until you start like booking stuff, or you can like kind of feel it. The good thing about now is there's a ton of teachers and coaching and classes on Zoom, so you don't have to live in LA or New York or Atlanta to get good instruction from people. It's going to be expensive, but that's just kind of the price of admission. So first off, basically, the two, or really, there's three main sites if you want to try to book jobs. It's casting networks, there's Actors Access, and then there's Backstage, which it's casting networks and Actors Access are they're about equal. Backstage, it's a little less as good. I still hear people booking stuff. I'm not personally on there. I'm just on casting networks and Actors Access, because on there you can click where you're at, so you can apply for jobs all over the country, but or you can just like click your general area. Most of the jobs are going to be in like LA, New York, and Atlanta, but they have people posting stuff all over the country. From there, you basically want some good headshots. There's kind of there's a difference between commercial headshots and theatrical headshots. Theatrical basically just meaning TV and film, and then commercial is just commercials. Commercial headshots are going to typically be brighter, and you're probably going to be smiling or having kind of a goofy look on your face, whereas theatrical tends to be a little bit more serious. And you really want to kind of research, see if you can find someone, or like go on IMDb and just look up your favorite actors, because they'll have headshots on there, so you can kind of understand, because they're not really portraits, because if you go in and get a portrait, it's just going to look a little goofy, because you basically, it's not so much that you want a picture of you want a picture of the character you could play, so there's a nuance there. And also, like, when you're getting a headshot, you kind of want to you want to bring it to life kind of in the eyes. And the way you do that is, let's say you want to play a bad guy. I want to play bad guys. I'm a bad guy. You don't just go in there thinking I'm a bad guy. You have to have something. You have to be thinking of something. So you'd want to put into your mind, think about someone you don't like or someone you hate, and you just think about having a conversation with them, or even start verbalizing it a little bit, have an imaginary conversation with someone you hate, and then your face will change when you're thinking of things. Or like, say you're going out for I want to be like a lead all American guy. Think about, you're talking to your best friend, you walk into a room and see a buddy you haven't seen in a while, and then your face will light up and you'll kind of be more open. So just giving all your viewers some secret insider tips for that. Anyway, so you get your headshots, right? So now you have the catch 22 problem of like, I need footage to get the job, but I can't get the job without footage. So how do I get footage? So basically, you can make the footage yourself, or you just go and find a bunch of free stuff, a lot of student films, stuff like that. Depending on where you're at, they'll have different programs at like universities, community colleges, stuff like that. Most have some type of film program, and they're going to need actors and stuff to shoot their assignments. So you can reach out, just look on. Most of them are probably going to be using like either Actors Access or Casting Network, so you can find stuff on there. But you just have to do a bunch of free stuff until you have enough footage to get the paid stuff, and it sucks.
Paying your dues.
Yeah, basically. And a lot of times, there can be issues with that, especially with student films, because basically, as an actor, I just need like 10 or 15 seconds of me looking good on camera. That's it. I don't need anything else. That's all for my reel, because casting directors, they have to go through like 400 different like views. Like, so I just need a little bit. I don't need like 10 minutes of footage, but a lot of people on their first film, they'll be self-conscious and they don't want anyone else to see it. I've had that a few times where I'll like do something for free and I'll be like, oh, this will look good, and then I just never get it, and I'm like, oh well, that's just kind of the price you pay. But basically, once you get that, you cut your reel together. Oh yeah, if you're gonna make footage, make something. the most important thing you need is good sound. Like you can have like mediocre picture or whatever, but if the sound sucks, it's not going to be watchable and people aren't going to take you serious. So like, let me see it. Hold on, let me grab something. So this is basically my rig, but this you have a boom mic. You basically need one of these to plug into your camera. It doesn't have to be this big, but basically you just want good sound, whether that's a lav mic or a boom mic. If in a close up, a boom mic is going to be good enough for you to get good dialogue. But yeah, you just want to have decent sound. That's super important. And then you can just shoot your own scenes, write your own scenes. You can have chat GBT write you a scene and then just shoot it, like if you're not a writer. So like, yeah, that's kind of how you get around that. And then once you have that, you can just, email, see, like look in your town, see who the talent reps are, because you have commercial agents, they're usually easier to get than theatrical agents. And depending on where you're at, there may or may not be, talent management agencies. So then from there, you just email people, or on casting networks and Actors Access, you can pay like $35 to have your materials sent out to everyone who's on there, and then you'll get responses back. That's kind of the easiest way to go about it. And if people like your stuff, they'll email you back and say, hey, we want to rep you. And you just kind of go from there. And then after that, you're basically working your way up the talent management ladder. So it's like, I think it's like 7 different major, like all the A-listers are rep by like William Morris Endeavor, CAA,
Yeah.
all these big ones. So from there, you're basically just trying to climb the ladder of like better and better agencies to get you better and better gigs. Because like the higher up you get there, you're not going to see like, hey, we need Superman for, the new DC movie on any of these websites, because, that's going to go to A-listers. They're not going to just be like, hey, we can't find Thor. What are we going to do? No, A-listers are
Backstage. It's
backstage. Backstage. So, but yeah, that's pretty much, I was always fairly interested in horror movies and stuff. And so whenever I like to play the villain roles are always fun. So I like to go out for those. It just kind of, you get what you get, and, it's competitive. But, I also have a group of guys out here and we shoot stuff on our own. So it's just kind of like, if you want to be in this industry, you really have to always find a way to create. And really, like, you can't shoot something when a script doesn't exist. So like, writers are the most valued. That's why there's a strike happening right now. Like, this industry doesn't work without writers. And so, if you're able to be a great writer, then you bring so much value to like being able to shoot and just do anything, and you're like worth your weight in gold. Because like, but that's the hardest part. You really have to write every day. It's like, yeah, it's like
I feel validated.
Yeah, there you go.
That's primarily what I do, is I
Oh,
write.
nice.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, no, it's super important. Like, without people like you writing, it's just, and it takes so much work. I'm like, I'll write sometimes. It's like when the muse comes to visit, I'll be like, okay, yeah, and then 10 pages later, I'm like, okay, that was a nice little dopamine kick. I feel validated. I'm
Well,
gonna do this again.
sometimes
Yeah.
I got to put that bitch in a chokehold. It's like,
Mm.
sit down, woman. I'm trying to work here.
Yeah. So yeah, but it just really comes down to consistency. Whatever anyone wants to do, you just have to find a time to do it every day. That's when I have been on my writer's kick, just making sure I do it every day. And then it just takes a few days of not doing that, and then just like having something else going on, and then it's like, oh no, wait. And then a month later, it's like, oh yeah, what? Oh shit, I haven't been writing. Damn it. So yeah. But yeah,
That's why
before.
that's literally, if you, I don't know if you
Oh,
can see it in my office. That's why I have HP Lovecraft
oh,
like
nice.
right there, because he's
Uh,
one of my favorite authors. But I have him sitting there
nice.
looking over my shoulder, essentially
Mm.
saying, "You should be writing. Why are you not writing?" It's like,
Yeah,
you should,
yeah.
yeah,
Looking over
as
and
my
just like,
reminder.
oh, what you writing there? Huh? Nothing. Oh, you better get on. Yeah.
So going on, and I remember, because I went
Mhm.
to school myself. I graduated the Kim Dawson Conservatory back in '03, and I went through the whole thing. Now, there's a couple questions I have to ask.
Yeah.
So, as far as like acting style, when you're talking about training, because training is so important,
Mhm.
is there a particular style that you adhere to, or do you pick from the ones that you like, or one that you're really really grounded in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the styles that I mostly focus on, I started out. Let's see, how can I wrap around this? Um, so I learned. I'd say I first got proficient in improv because I did that for a couple of years. So I feel very comfortable and like also like just coming up with things, and then which that's just one tool. You can't really there's a lot of other things you can't just like improvise your way through a non-improv show,
Right.
but it definitely helps if I'm like, hey, can I try this? I think this would be really good. And just like, or if there's ever room for improv, like if a director, I had this happen recently, he's like, yeah, there's a little room for improv. And to me, that says, I'm going to do the lines, but if the camera keeps rolling after that, I'm just going to keep talking because I have ideas. And so I'm always pretty good about like finding the humor and levity in a scene where I'll come up with jokes and be like, that'd be funny to say. Let me see if I can find a way to, or it's just like being learning to be present in the moment. Because with improv, if you're not, you have to be in it in order for it to work. So it's helped me kind of stay grounded. And then when I did the coaching, I was basically taught more kind of like a method approach where it's just like staying in it and kind of feeling it. Um, I'd say with that, it's like it's not like Jared Leto or something where being, oh, better edit that out. I might work with the guy one day. No, or like you hear all this stuff, which honestly I think it's probably more, or I hope it's more like marketing BS than like
Gotcha.
sending condoms, used condoms to your coworkers. It's like that's not helping anyone. It's not going to help. It certainly is not going to help my approach, but it's just learning how to kind of connect with the characters and really break it down. There's really only typically a couple of scene objectives there. When you really break it down, it's like trying to get someone on your side, or there's a different in status and you're trying to get your power from the scene. So when you really break it down, like, okay, what is the scene objective here? Like, am I above this person or below this person? Or, maybe you're trying to torture someone and you're just enjoying your power and you're just, so it's when you're able to identify the actual scene objective and then just kind of break it down. That's what I kind of learned to do. And then just learning how to break down the script because, um, for me before I until like recently I was just didn't really have a way to break things down properly, so I just kind of do the rote memorization. And unfortunately, like a lot of places you're going to give money to, they might teach a certain technique but they won't necessarily teach you how to break down a script properly, so you kind
Right.
of go line by line and then you figure out like, okay, what am I trying to do with this line? It's like, because it could just be like, I could be like, hey JL, how have you been? And then so what am I actually saying? What's the subtext there? Am I trying to like, am I asking you? The simple thing would be to ask, I'm just asking you a question. Or am I trying to intimidate you? Because then it would be like, oh hey JL, how are you doing? So depending on what you're actually saying with that line will dictate how you say it as well. So once you're able to go line by line and break down, you call it the beats, like kind of the emotional energy for each one.
Mhm.
And sometimes one whole sentence or like one paragraph will just be one beat, and that's fine. You don't need to have a different thing for each line because then you just come off as like, bipolar or something.
Very staccato. Yeah, you want to avoid that staccato where everything's
Yeah,
just like
yeah, just like, AJ,
yeah.
how you doing? Anyway, so yeah, so but yeah, just learning how to break down the script. That's my approach. It's breaking down. There's also substitution. I don't really lock into that as much. That's very method where it's like typically you're just going to substitute the person with someone who's very close in your life. So typically it's going to be mom, dad, or siblings, or maybe best friend. I don't really lock into that as much. It didn't really feel like it helped me. Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of get more, just think about the character as opposed to, if I'm not really connecting with, if it doesn't seem like I'm connecting, then I might try to do substitution, but I'll usually do the other two things more, where I'm just like scene objective and then break down the beats and then just going over the script. And then um, Michael Caine has this drill. It's called, basically, he'll do the script normal and then he'll do it like he's talking to a 6-year-old. So you can do something like that. And the reason why you do that, it's so you don't get stuck. Because if you only practice it one way, when you're on set or you get into an in-person audition and they ask you to do adjustments, you're not going to be able to do it if you just spend like 6 hours practicing it one way. So you want to do it as differently as possible. There's also, my coach called it a 2 a.m. drill, where you do it as though you're leaving the club with your best buddy at 2 in the morning. So it's like very high energy. So you have a breadth of you have a much wider range of what you can do with the scene and the character, as opposed to a lot of people just drill it one way, and then when you're in person audition, um, I mean, almost everything now is self-tape, so you won't necessarily have this problem per se. But if you're in the room, it's only natural for your adrenaline to spike a little bit, so you're going to
Yeah.
speed up, or you might speed up, and then if you only do it one way when you're relaxed, then it's gonna, you're gonna have some issues. So I'm getting really, this is turning into an actor's studio talk here, but yeah.
Well, and I'm curious because what we learned at KD was
Mhm.
predominantly we focused on the Cohen method, and
Yeah.
that was developing what's called the GOAT sheet with your goals, your obstacles, your
Mhm.
tactics, and your expectations, and
Yeah.
that you have kind of an overall sheet for the entire
Mhm.
project, like what the story's being told, and then for each
Yeah.
individual scene, you might have sub goals or sub obstacles or
Mhm.
things that suddenly arise that you basically you work it from there and you do your script breakdown. It's the exact
Mhm.
same thing, and
Yeah.
then you break it down in kind of like this hierarchy. So you have like a nested
Mhm.
hierarchy, and then you approach each one. But the first and foremost, it's about knowing the script and
Mhm.
then developing the character and understanding, and then stepping into those shoes and then working it like that. So
Mhm.
it's a bit more analytical
Yeah.
than I would say like Anthony Hopkins' approach, which is like read the script 200 times and
Mhm.
now I've got it set in my head. And then when I'm in the moment, I know the script so well that I can adjust and I can give different variations. It's
Mhm.
similar to John Cusack, because every take John Cusack does, it's different because he's
Mhm.
always willing to try something new and different. There was an interesting story on 1408 because you had Cusack and you had Sam Jackson, and the two of
Mhm.
them are working together, completely different schools of thought. And it makes for an interesting dynamic
Yeah.
because Cusack is doing a different thing every single take. He's down, he's up,
Mhm.
he's here, he adjusts. Whereas Sam Jackson is,
Yeah.
if
Sam
I do
Jackson.
it, and then that's how I'm going to do it. Very, very De Niro in that respect. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's interesting how many ways you can come across, you can
Mhm.
come at it. And I love what I loved
Mhm.
was the dynamic of working with actors who train differently,
Mhm.
because it's almost like we're speaking the same language, but it's kind of like Italian and Spanish, where
Yeah.
they're related, and you can kind
Mhm.
of get some across, but finding that dynamic is like reading their body
Mhm.
in the moment, which becomes more organic. And I love organic whenever I'm shooting
Yeah.
a scene or I'm in a scene. I love those organic moments that pop, that go
Mhm.
like that the actors don't expect, and then they react like their characters. And it's like
Mhm.
I love those moments. They That's the magic that I think
Yeah.
exists there,
Yeah.
is seeing those. Now,
Mhm.
you mentioned headshots. I'm very curious. I'm old school,
Yeah.
and a lot of actors I know a lot of actors I know are old school. Just I think virtue of our age when we came up. Do you prefer? I think this is totally opinion. Do
Mhm.
you prefer color headshots or black and whites?
It's all color now. I mean,
I
back in the,
hate that. I
yeah.
hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate
Yeah.
color headshots. I see color headshots and I'm like,
Mhm.
ugh, if I see a black and white, I'm
Mhm.
immediately drawn to what they're
Mhm.
emoting to me.
I see
not
what you
this
mean.
visual. Because with the color,
Mm.
I'm distracted by the color
Oh
contrast. Like
yeah.
what's going on? What is intended to what are they trying to make pop to
Mm.
me? With black and white, all I see is them. And it's kind
Mm.
of like, what are they conveying to me?
Mm.
You know, and then I can see the depth of that. And that's where I'm like, I hear
Yeah.
color headshots, and I'm like, oh, it just
Mm.
grates at me. But that's just me. I'm
Yeah.
I'm old in that. I'm old fashioned in that respect.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I will say, part of it that might be like there are a lot of people who take headshots and they will overcorrect, I guess. They'll like do too much Photoshop to make like take out all the imperfections and stuff, and you
Right.
can tell it's just like, oh, that looks like someone just has smooth. No one has that smooth of skin, you know. So I think maybe the pendulum that could be part of it too. It's just like there's too much post production done on some of these headshots, and that's like good headshot photographers and everything will just like they know how to, you know, they'll be expensive, but they'll take, yeah, you just want to look like yourself on a good skin day, basically.
Right.
Any more
You
than that.
you get what you pay for, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So, but you know, in the short term, good enough's good enough. But eventually, you get to the point where you're like, okay, I want something that you know is a little more true. But it makes sense. I mean, black and white headshots, at least out here, will make people think, oh, is this your modeling headshot, or you know, so it's like, oh, cool. But yeah, so but yeah,
I think I'm just old
uh,
Hollywood in that respect. I just
uh,
prefer those. I say, you know, I look at them and I just look at what I when I look at color, I'm just always
mm,
concerned about what I'm not seeing. And with
oh
black and white, I
yeah,
don't have to be concerned about that. I can be focused solely on what the
mhm,
individual is conveying to me with their eyes, with their micro expressions, what's coming
yeah.
across. That, yeah, but like I said, it's an opinion on that.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to training, and one thing that I found in my experience is that
Mhm.
of the three predominant different kinds of acting that you can do, you
Mhm.
do your typical performance, which people think of acting as, you know, when you're in a role, and so like you're
Mhm.
either on screen or you're on stage, and that's the performance, you know.
Mhm.
But then you also have voice acting, and
Yeah.
then in my eyes, you also have, or I would think people would agree, you have movement acting, whereas
Mhm.
essentially there's no vocalization. Oftentimes there could be no even like face. If you think of individuals like Javier Botet or Doug Jones,
Mhm.
you know, Derek Mears, where you have very little opportunity to work with all the tools we have available to us.
Mhm.
You've restricted the tool, so you have to be able to convey everything a face can without using your face, which is so phenomenally difficult. Have you
Mhm.
gone through any specific movement training as because we did it at KD, we had movement
Mhm.
training specifically, but did you find yourself going into that in order to, like you said, with that demon character you played?
Mhm. Let me think. I haven't specifically done any type of movement classes or training. I mean, I've always been a pretty active person, so I think it's just been kind of like I'll see something and then I'll try it, and then just kind of like, okay, how would this person? I think maybe an improv we've done. We've had a couple. There will be like a day in improv each term where it's like, okay, we're going to try some movement stuff. So I've done a little bit, but not like a class that was specifically focused on that. But it's just kind of like um, focusing. And I've been an active guy. I've done like martial arts here and there and lift weights and stuff. So I kind of have a sense of balance. And then like, okay, what happens if your center of balance is high versus low versus just like, you know, what how your feet, how you step. And I always enjoy, depending on like if it's appropriate, the part, like I enjoy like, okay, how can I, you know, the movement, and it's more for creatures, but even with characters, it's like, okay, how does this, what's this person's breakdown? Like if somebody is out of shape versus in shape, if they have a limp. So you can kind of like sprinkle some of these little things and it can bring more life to the character. But basically I just, you know, fuck around and find out. It's like, okay, I'll try this, see if it works. Does it work for the character? No. Okay, I'll try something else. I kind of like pull back a little bit, or you know, but it's more, you can do more of that in the creature work, or if you know somebody has, if a character has a specific some type of physical condition or something, or like, let's say they're maybe a smoker, or they have something, maybe they have a limp, then you can kind of just like play with that a little bit, or, overweight versus underweight. You can kind of move different. Or like if I really wanted to get into it, I could adjust like my workout routine a little bit, because like, how big you are can restrict your movement a little bit versus how what you're a little more like loose when you don't like lift weights as much. So I might like play with that a little bit, or like if I want to be more limber, I might stretch out more leading up to a roll. Um, and then even just little things like how much you are on the balls of your feet versus your heels, that can make a difference with how like movement based you are. So long story short, I play with it a little bit, but it really dictates the role, how much I might implement that. And typically, if I'm playing like creature, I'm going to play with that a lot more. Versus if I'm kind of more in grounded reality, I'm probably going to play with that a lot less. Because you also don't want to do something that is like distracting for no reason. Like if it doesn't
Right.
serve the character to do something specific, then I'm not going to do it. Like it has to be specific and serve the character in the story. Otherwise, you're just kind of like getting high on your own supply. Like, oh, look at how good of an actor I am. I made it look at my limp. Isn't that so realistic? And I think that's kind of the trap that actors can get into sometimes. Like whenever an actor learns to cry, they want to cry in every single thing. It's like, no, that's not, people don't cry that much. It's not necessary for this. It's like, oh, I learned this new tool, I want to use it and show. It's only natural to want to share the things we've mastered, but it doesn't always work for everything. So there's always, yeah, I try to be as careful and cognizant as I can to only use the tools that are necessary for the specific role. Because, like, a lot of times it's the less is more, in my opinion, when it comes to this type of work. And if you can do more with less, then that's always going to be ideal, because
Yeah.
then it's just, it's more powerful. People will all, it's kind of like horror movies, the ones that are scariest is where you don't fully get to see the monster because people's imagination fills
Imagine
it
it.
with
Yeah.
their biggest fears. So you can kind of do that with acting in a way. People will fill in typically the good, like, oh, that was so, powerful. It's like the, what was the Russian term with the match cuts where it's like they had a guy just looking and then they put all kinds of different stuff in there, and then it was just a guy, he was like looking at a wall but you don't see it, and then they put like a funeral procession and they cut back to him, it was like, oh, he was so sad, and then they cut to like a child, he's like, oh, he was such a loving father. It's like people will, I forget the term, I learned it in film school, I'm drawing a blank, it was a Russian, it's not Chekhov's gun, it was something else. Anyway, the guy who discovered match cuts basically. But people will fill in based off of, like, you could literally have a blank expression and people fill in the meaning based off of what the other thing is when you're reacting. So you can potentially mess that up if you overdo it. So, but yeah, so
I remember Kubrick used that quite a
yeah,
bit. Kubrick used that in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and
mhm,
where something like the bone, like from the Bone Club to the spaceship in orbit,
mhm,
would use
yeah,
those, cutting the
mhm,
intersplicing those two scenes, connecting the theme, but using two
yeah.
different images, two different contexts to connect that.
Mhm.
Um,
It's shot, reverse shot. That's what it is. Mash cuts is something, but shot, reverse shot is just like, oh, looking at that, the thing, and then back. And you could literally just not be looking at anything. And people, if you're a good editor, you can do a lot.
oh yeah.
So, yeah. But
So
yeah.
has as far as acting goes, how I got to ask this of
Mhm.
pretty much everybody. So, how has the strike affected you, or has it affected you at all so far?
Um, a little bit.
And how are you adapting?
Yeah, so for me, I'm SAG eligible, so I'm not in the union right now, so I can still work non-union jobs and I can do like, pretty much whatever I want right now. So, I mean, no one's really working any union gigs, so I'm just doing like getting together with other people who are shooting stuff and, just being as productive as I can. I'm still auditioning for things. And making content on my own. So for me, it doesn't affect me as much. I mean, a lot of the bigger stuff like union movies and TV shows, those are obviously those are big budget things. They pay better, and they keep a lot of people in business. So it's for me personally, it's slowed down a little bit. I've done set work and stuff like that too. I still do pretty much whatever I can to stay on set. Whether it's PA. I used to actually do practical effects for a couple of years until I kind of pulled back just so I could focus more on acting. And that's mostly just turning on a smoke machine and putting a fan in a specific direction. It's a little more complicated than that, but usually it's just getting smoke or haze and learning how to control that stuff. So I did that for a while, and it's good to anyone who wants to get into film. I think I'd recommend like go on as a PA and try to have one, even if it's a small gig, try to work in every position you can just so you know how the machine works.
Yeah.
Because now I know why we're waiting. I can just look around and be like, okay, they're doing a camera setup. Okay, that's a steady cam. It's going to take a while to balance that and get the blocking and stuff. So yeah, I edit as well. So like, if I'm between gigs, I'll take on some editing jobs and stuff like that. So I don't just act. I still have my fingers in a lot of other aspects of filmmaking and stuff like that. So I do like to direct too. I'll still direct probably like one or two shorts a year. Initially, that's kind of what my main focus was, and then I discovered acting, and I'm like, all right, I can act more than I can direct, just from a time constraint, because especially out here, you're typically not gonna find someone who's like, oh man, I'm such a great writer, but I'm agoraphobic. I just please someone take this off my hands and direct for me because I don't want anything to do with it. I just want my stuff. So you kind of have to at least out here, unless you have like a specific group or you have people who are just some scenario like that. If you want to direct, you have to be a good writer too, and you also have to produce. And producing basically just means
Mhm.
manage the whole project from start to finish. Like, okay, pre-production, where are we going to shoot? Casting, so you can only do that so much on kind of like when you only have like a handful or depending on how many people you have per project, because
Right.
there will always be plenty of actors out there to be in your projects, but having like a solid script and then calling in the favors to shoot, here and there, and then just having decent equipment and everything, it can add up. Even if you call in the favors, you're still going to have to, pull out a little bit of cash here and there. And, I've been on the sets where I'm like, all right, I'm fine. It's no budget. I could use the footage. And then you show up and like, the crafty, bro, when the crafty is not good, you're just like, what? Bro, if anything else, if you are on a shoestring budget, put money in good crafty, good food, because there's nothing worse than like being on set and then going over lunch. Like you're supposed to eat every 6 hours. Sometimes you'll be on sets where they're behind and stuff, but then
Yeah.
when that happens, and then you have like, just I don't know, a cold sandwich and jello, you're like, what? This is what I signed up for. So, it's feeding people properly. It's a good gesture, and it keeps people happy. They're like, oh, fuck yeah, food was great, so
That's something that we do. We
yeah.
put a lot of focus on with the productions that we're
Mm.
behind. I remember that we had a full like when we were shooting an upcoming project that we did called 11 to 6, which is which is a slasher film.
Mm.
We ensured like I think it was we had that a professional chef cater that came
Oh,
in, and we brought a chef in order to
no.
lay out a spread that they had completely planned. Like, okay, that's going to work with a variety of options, both for the carnivores and the vegans out there. But I remember like they came in, they set up in the like we had like kind of like a vestibule area where it was kind of like offset when we were shooting, and they set up the whole thing, big
Mm.
long spread that people could go from hot plate to hot plate. Magnificent food, but like our director Eugene, who's our resident director, always make sure damn sure that we have good food there, because if the food sucks, people are going to lose their energy, they're going to lose their focus, they're going to get pissy, they're going to get frustrated, and it's just going to undermine your whole project, because
Mm.
actors live and die in their stomachs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Get some coffee, some energy drinks too.
Yeah.
I think I was on one, I've been on one set where they didn't have coffee. It was a guy who was just kind of starting out. So I remember I was just like, hey man, you got some coffee? He's like, oh, I brought orange juice. I was like, ooh, must be his first rodeo. So I kind of let it go. Like, okay, I'm gonna go grab an energy drink. I'll be right back. And yeah, it was cool. But yeah, so yeah, but that kind of comes with the territory. You work whatever comes your way, and sometimes you can, the I will say the benefit about even working, some of these smaller projects, even if the food isn't the best, typically those directors will be more open to like giving you more artistic freedom, because when the project is smaller, there's a little bit more overlap, and you can just be like, hey, I have an idea for this, can I try this? They'll usually say yes. With the bigger productions, I mean, it might be costing like $1,000 a minute or something, or like when you really break it down. I did I worked on the TV show SWAT. It was the season
Oh,
5
nice.
finale. And basically I was just helping clear base. Okay, so terrorists put a bomb on a cruise ship. The Queen Mary out here is where we shot it. And we basically had to clear this cruise ship. So I was like running around in the background with a full chemical suit on, and we were like clearing the cruise ship. But let's see. Oh yeah, so I think I did the math. I forget, but it was that show. Forget how much they put in for it. It was something ridiculous, like $10 million an episode or 25 million an episode.
Wow.
Something. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't that much, but I think I did the math, or someone did the math, and it was like I don't know, like $10,000 a minute to shoot. And because they had like all the extras, they had the renting the Queen Mary, all the actors, and it was really quick because like on that show they would do like they do 2 takes max and then just move on, and it was out within 3 weeks because they have like TV shows, they have a machine, and I was just like, oh shit, like that, it was that quick. But it's because all the actors know who they are, know their role, and so there's like not as much directing that has to happen when you've been playing the same characters for like 5 years and everyone kind of knows. So they just get in and out. And it was like, it's super interesting working on a TV show versus like working on movies. You tend to take a lot more time in between for each scene and everything. So it's just, the machine is different depending on where you're at and what you're doing. So it's
That was Kevin Smith's takeaway,
mm,
because Kevin Smith was talking about, after he got done with I don't think he's done as a director for films, but he took a break and
mm,
he started doing TV. So he did some stuff for CW with the
mm,
Arrowverse, with Supergirl and Flash. And he said coming on as a director in those, it was kind of like, oh, I walk in, I
mm,
sit down, and action, and they do their thing and
uh,
cut. Oh, I guess we're okay. We're done.
yeah,
And he said it
yeah,
was shocking. It was shocking how like the difference in between directing TV and directing movies was, because
mm,
he felt like when he was directing TV, he's like, "What the hell am I doing here? This is so lazy. All
yeah,
I'm doing is just like and I'm getting paid for it." It's like these guys know what they're doing.
uh,
Let them run. He's like, "No, we have to have someone who calls action and calls cut."
mm,
It's like,
yeah,
and but I found it to be intriguing
mm,
how different those animals are,
mm,
and moving from movies to TV. But I especially also love stage, because
mm,
I love that's where my background was. I came up
mm,
on the stage, and I love stage performance, and directing on stage also wildly different,
mm,
because of the fact. Because I think it's because you're prepping for the audience instead of for the screen.
mm,
So knowing that where your audience is going to be sitting, whether they're like right up close or whether you're filling a giant theater, that has like 5,000 seats. So that's always a really interesting organic animal,
Mhm.
which I really really like.
Mhm.
Have you done much stage in your
Um,
background?
yeah, so when I was in college, I did Legally Blonde. I played Kyle the UPS guy, which was a super
Fucking
fun role.
sweet.
Yeah, I did some free. It was like a theater out here, Metro MD. It was I did that out here. It's been a while. I will say, and then all the improv stuff that was all staged. That's one thing that you kind of have to learn to adjust. It's to you're cheating towards the audience versus cheating
Yes.
towards camera. Because then, like when I was doing a bunch of stage stuff in improv, I'd have a tendency to kind of present towards where the audience would be, as opposed to like staying tight with the camera. Because with the camera, like any little movement, it's going to be magnified like 10x, and a lot of times you don't want to be like moving around a ton, and you're, you know, obviously close ups, you need to know like, okay, this is how I do like behave in a close up, or how I move versus like the wider. And I'd say, because I'm a musician too, so doing theater, it's kind of like very similar to playing music to an audience. It's just one take, so there's a different type of pressure and energy. Where it's live, you get instant feedback. That's the beauty about like stage work. It's like, if it's hitting or not, because you can hear the reactions. And
Right.
sometimes you'll be doing the same thing, and it's like the night before, you're like, oh, we're going to kill this one thing I did. I'm going to hit it like that. And then for whatever reason, that audience just isn't digging the same thing, and there will just be different energies. Sometimes it's like depending on the day and stuff. So it's just like it's a different beast. It's the same, like, same ballpark, but like just a slightly different game. So
One of my favorites, even though the play in and of itself, and this is actually my first professional role out of school,
mm,
was I got to go and get paid, and it was my first like I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to be on
uh,
stage. That's always a fun feeling. It's like the first time
yeah.
you walk on that stage and you're like, oh, I'm cutting a paycheck. This is amazing.
Mm,
Equity plays are also a lot of fun to do because it's the same kind of like very union gig. It's like,
mm,
nope, we're going to lunch right now. Like that, you have that you have the rep there, which is awesome. But I played Van Helsing in
mm,
a stage production of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I remember that the difference, the predominantly difference there was the live audience, was having the live audience right there in front of you, and it's different from night to night. Sometimes you have one that you get the energy from them, and you can play
mm,
off of that, and everything is rolling really good. Sometimes the audience is just dead; they don't react to
mm.
anything, and you're like, "What am I doing wrong?"
uh,
Because you're not getting that instantaneous gratification. And I remember one night, and this is pure emotion, because when it's live, like you said, it's one take. So even though
mm,
you're doing like 15, 20, 25, 30 shows, I'm up there on stage, it's the same role every night, but you never know what's going to happen. And I remember one night we had a group of teenagers
mm.
that was in the front row, and they would not stop talking. So, and
Oh,
we're all aware of it. Like, all of us on stage, we're doing a dramatic scene when I'm giving Lucy her blood transfusion and everything. It's all dramatic and shit. And people are like freaking out, and they're just like yapping and on their phones. And we
oh,
are all we get off of the scene. We're backstage, we're like, what the fuck? Somebody go handle those people. And I remember the night that this was happening, and it was so bad because my dean of education was there from KD. T.A. Taylor was in the audience, and I did the scene where I have to finish staking Lucy, and I'm like, oh, I stake Lucy, and Lucy's dead, and I have the hammer in my hand, the mallet in my hand, and they are just like yada yada, yada, and it's quiet, and everybody's like, except these kids, and they're like
uh,
running their mouths, blah, 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 blah. And in my character's frustration, I
uh,
throw the hammer at the ground. I lost Lucy, and the hammer just happened to bounce off the stage and directly hit them. And it just like I kind of launched it directly at them, and then all of a sudden they shut up. And I was
uh,
like, and then we closed curtain on that scene to go to intermission, because that's like the intermission moment. We close curtain,
mm,
and I hear them. They're like, "Did he just throw that hammer at us?" I'm like, "Fuck
uh,
yes, I did."
yeah,
That's why I love stage. So stage is so much fun to go to,
mm,
because you never know what's going to happen. It's always just like
yeah,
very Bill O'Reilly. Fuck it, let's do it live, and let's just
yeah,
never know what's going to pop. It's so much fun.
uh,
Going forward with your career, And I see
Mhm.
you've got some things that are currently coming up. Like I noticed on your IMDb that you've got what looks like something called Meat Hook, which is in post.
Yeah, actually, so I worked with my buddy from film school, Jeremy Pear. He went to CSUN as well. He was a couple classes, terms ahead of me. I don't know, he was like a year ahead of me. So I helped him out with this feature, which it's super cool. I got to play the bad guy. I filled in a few times as the bad guy. There are a couple, truth be told, there are a couple people who played the villain. But that's currently in post production. It was cool. It was an indie, self funded like project. We shot it over COVID, so like when
Nice.
everything was like close, you could get away with a little more when nobody was around watching. So we shot that. He directed it. I just kind of helped with. I helped cast that actually, and what I will say from an actor perspective, casting a project, it helped open my mind to a lot of different things. Like, um, basically, because for each part, there's probably like maybe 300 people who applied. And then it's just like, the bell curve, how it's just like, whoop.
Mm-hmm.
The people who apply for the gig, it falls into that where there's like a bunch of people in the middle who you're just like, nah, don't really feel too strongly. There's about 15% who you're like a strong no, where it's just the people, because I can say when I first started acting, I was there too. So I can appreciate, like, okay, I know why they did it, where it's just like a wide frame and you can clearly see them reading it, and then there's like terrible lighting and it looks like they're in a dungeon. It's like, okay, I get it. This person probably thinks, fuck it, I'll give it the college go. Maybe they'll see something in me. And then there's like maybe like the 15% or so, like the one standard deviation, as they say in statistics, where it's like, okay, this is the actual pool of people who we're going to pick from. So it was interesting just kind of seeing how people, or like some of the things that people would do, like the bad things. It's like having script in hand because you typically want to be off book. I mean, with some of the strikes now, they basically say you don't have to be off book, but
Mm-hmm.
still, you're probably gonna. If we're trusting someone, we want them to be off book, basically. All right, that long,
Yes.
long and short. You're gonna better your opportunities if you're off book. But also sometimes, so cameras here, typically you're just going to be looking slightly off camera. Sometimes people would be like a full, almost like three
Like
quarter. I'm just like,
profile.
I can't even basically see like almost a profile. So it's just like little things like that where I'm just like, all right, I gotta go through this whole thing. And then um, we were doing in-person auditions as well as taped auditions. And I remember um, I think a couple people didn't show up or something. Or when you're holding in-person auditions, something always happens. People are late. You give a range. You try to schedule people in. People are late. They have other things. But I remember it was like we had like maybe an hour before anyone was going to come in, and there was just some random person in the waiting area because there's always multiple rooms in these casting places. I'm like, fuck it. Let's give this random person a try, see what happens. And oh yeah, it was a bad idea. It was just like they were just a completely crazy person, basically, like totally delusional, couldn't read the part or act. Granted, cold reading, cold auditions are a skill in and of itself, but it's pretty clear to me, like, oh yeah, this is no, this is not doing that again. So I'm just like, hey, thanks for coming in. We'll be in touch. And then yeah, so casting, it's interesting. It's fun in a way where you kind of get to be on the other side, but then you also have like, you have to sift through a lot of people when you're kind of on the doing kind of like the indie side. Like if you, because another thing I've learned from that is, if you're like, let's say you have some money and you want like what I will say, if you have money, if you have a little bit of money, try to get some type of guest star. If you want to get a guest star in, like someone who, like, say, a Kane Hodder or something,
Hmm.
um, a lot of times on IMDb, that's just they'll have like a number, but that's not how you actually reach them. Like, you have to hire a casting director because there's IMDb, which has some information, but
Hmm.
there's actually a separate software, like basically subscription service that casting directors use, which I think it costs like $1,000 a year. But that's how they can actually find the information to contact their actual reps. Because a lot of the numbers you have on IMDb, it'll just go to an office and it'll go to an answering machine, and you'd be like, "Hey, this is a casting director," and then it cuts off. I'm like, "Fuck." And then so it's hard to actually, there's like a separation, there's like kind of a barrier for entry to even contact people who are working regularly, so that way like crazy people who are making
Right.
horror movies can't just go on IMDb and contact them. But so casting was interesting, but yeah, that project's super cool. It's in post. They're looking at, I'm not sure if we're going to get it into the festivals this year because we're doing some VFX and stuff like that, but it's basically done, and where it's just getting to the finish line, like that last 10%, which it's sometimes that last 10% of the stretch can take as long as like everything else, but we're pretty close to completion. That was a fun project. I got to don all this like weird stuff and go kill teenagers and stuff.
Yeah, looking at the trailer, looks really, really sharp because that's
Yeah.
up on IMDb currently. So that looks
Mhm.
really, really that's looking
Oh,
good. So I
yeah.
can't wait
What
for that to come out.
what I will say is there are definitely some very gruesome scenes. I think there may be one scene in there that I don't think I can't think of a movie that has a similar scene in terms of the type of gore and the specific way that this individual dies. I don't think I've seen it in any other movie. So I'll just throw that out there and let everyone leave that to your imagination and everyone else to think of
Nice.
what could possibly happen. So,
I love coming up. That's one of my favorite parts as far as writing goes, is
mm,
especially when writing slashers because I did the same thing with 11 to 6, and
mm,
I also did we did a short film which was a reimagining of the Nail Gun Massacre
mm,
that came out in 1985. And so we're
mm,
working on trying to get the feature length adaptation of that done, like the feature length remake done. But
mm,
we did another slasher called 11 to 6 about a waitress trapped in a diner by a psychopathic killer.
mm,
And I wrote a sequence in that I when I wrote it, I was like, I don't know how the hell we're gonna do this, but I went
mm,
for broke because it just kind of like it formed. Or I was like, ooh, what if the killer did this? It was like I want to see
yeah,
that on camera, but I didn't know. But they managed to pull it off, and I cannot wait for people to see it when we finally
mm,
premiere it. So I love coming up with intriguing ideas. Like I wonder if that's ever been done. And you go into those
yeah,
dark places. I freaking love it.
yeah.
In the future, um, do you see? Okay, so first, do you have any projects? Oh, like, do you specifically like want to work in the horror genre? You want to work mainstream across the board, whatever you can get your hands on? That's where you see yourself going.
Yeah, I definitely would like to do both. It's just it's interesting because you never really know where your career can take you.
Right.
And I'm just trying to keep my eyes open in every direction because it's like if I only focus on one thing, there could be something else over here that could actually open the doors to that thing. I definitely like horror. I've done a lot of my friends are shooting horror stuff too, so I'm like, all right, this is cool. I like this. I definitely enjoy doing like the creature stuff. So as much as I can, it's kind of one of those things too where I can only apply for the jobs that are in front of me. So it's like I can be like, oh, I just want to do horror, that's all I'm going to do. But sometimes people just aren't shooting horror, so I don't
Yeah.
want to like only just do the one thing. But yeah, I would like to I definitely, career wise, I want to be doing features and do TV and features basically, or streaming shows. Streaming would honestly be kind of
Awesome.
where it's at now. But yeah, and the features. I mean, I do like from the shorts, you just get to spend a little bit more time in the feature. It's kind of like I think that features, it's like having a baby, and then like TV shows, it's like having a teenager where you're like, all right, you're off and running. I just kind of jump in there and guide you along the way, where it's like, oh, this baby, we need to nourish it and bring it to life. And so there, it's just kind of like a different it's a different beast. They're both like, I just like to work as much as I can, because even some of the projects I've worked on where I've read the script, and like in my head, I'm just like, I don't even know if I want to do this. And then I end up doing it, and then it ends up being cool. I've had a couple, I had a web series I did where I thought the script, I was not sure how the script would resonate. And then it ended up getting like 6 million views in like a couple days. I'm like, all right, I guess I was wrong. So it's like, you never
Nice.
really know like what will resonate with people. And even if you get on a project where it seems a little bit outside of your, I don't know, sensibilities, I guess, there's an audience for basically everything. So like, it's just a way to get out there. And I kind of have this motto on set: limitations create innovations. Like, if there weren't constraints, then it wouldn't force you to work harder to get around those. So whether it's acting, or you're on set, or you're, maybe you have a location booked and then it's raining outside, or some crazy thing happens, like you kind of get to a point, whether it's acting or shooting or whatever it is, where you just have to be able to trust yourself that any challenge that comes your way, you'll be able to overcome it and do something. You'll work around it. But that also comes from doing a lot of pre-production and being prepared.
Mm,
You can't overcome what surprises if you're not already prepared for all the other outcomes that you can think of. So that's also the other thing, I guess, going on a little bit of a tangent to working on projects kind of outside of the acting aspect. Um, all of the projects I've worked on that have been successes, whether they're indie or whatever, well, we'll say on the indie side, because if someone's putting like $20 million into something, they're going to do this anyway. But for people who are just starting out, and try to think of every possible scenario that could go wrong with your project when you're shooting it, and then make a plan for that. And then if it happens, you'll be like, oh, no big deal, I made a plan for this. But like, we'll just say it takes 100 hours. We'll say it takes 100 hours to shoot a short from pre-production to post or whatever, not including editing. But so you can either spend like 25 hours a month, over a month, before preparing for everything, or you can prepare nothing and then end up on set and then not have a shot list, and then just try to, you're going to spend that 20 hours that day figuring out all your problems, and everyone's going to hate you.
try to
So
wing it, yeah.
yeah, winging it. There's a certain point where, like, if you're doing like just a short or something and you want to test your camera gear and you have like a rough outline, like, oh, let's just shoot some shit. It's like, yeah, you can do like a couple minutes, like a 2 or 3 minute proof of concept trailer where you're just kind of following characters if there's no real dialogue. But once you get, the more serious you get, the more work you have to put into it in order for it to be a success. Because the bigger it gets, you need more crew, and then there's just more logistics you have to, be aware of and take care of. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's rewarding, but it's also one of the things is, you don't, when you're first starting out, you don't know what you don't know. So it's like, you won't, you're gonna have to learn hard lessons in any art form or work, and that's just part of it. And hopefully, when you're first starting out, you're not putting a ton of money in these things anyway, so you won't lose a ton of because from lack of knowledge. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of just career wise in general, always keeping busy, and like just working on the craft one way or another. So yeah, I was doing. I kind of took a break. I was doing a YouTube channel for a little while, and I was just putting up more comedic stuff, and then that can take a little bit of time. Like, I would spend probably like 8 hours doing one like 90-second short, and I was like, oh damn, this is taking a lot more work than I thought. But I would do that between like film gigs and stuff that I was doing. So it's just kind of a way to like keep the creative juices flowing and whatnot.
Nice.
But just always staying busy and always finding something to do. Like, because you can always write. There's always something. Yeah, and then I guess don't be afraid to help other people on their projects, because like sometimes if somebody really needs like a PA or something, it's like, all right, I'll help you out on your project, and that's how you kind of build favor. Like there's a lot of jobs people don't want to do, and PA is probably at the top of the list on that one. So but you can learn a lot just from doing some of those like grunt jobs where you're running around helping out, and that's how you build a network too. It's like working some of the jobs you don't necessarily want to make a career out of, but it's a way to get on set and meet other people and make connections that way. And that's just kind of something that everyone sort of has to go to. There's no real cheat code. That is the cheat code, is doing the jobs people don't want to do. So then they appreciate it. So you can build that, social currency and build those favors like, hey, I'm shooting this project. And if you do a good job, people recognize good work, and
Hmm.
you don't always have to go in there and like always, I don't know, like the best thing anyone can do is be on set and just listen and be aware. Like you don't need to try to squeeze in that one liner in front of the director so that way he'll think you're cool. You can just kind of like just let it be natural. Like if you don't know much or you're inexperienced, that's fine. Like people are generally happy to take you under their wing and like kind of like show you the ropes and stuff like that. So just kind of like get on there, get busy for people who want this. Oh, I will say, and I mean this with love and sincerity, this is probably the worst business to be in the world. Like it is the least
So
on the
true.
front end. Like 90% of people don't make it. So like you really have to love this in order to make the sacrifice and understand that like it may never be a career. It could be what I call a jobby. It's like a job hobby. It's you wish it was your job, but it ends up being your hobby. And it's like that for a long time for a lot of people. Like I mean, I think it takes like about 5 years to be good at your craft, and then probably another 5 years to really showcase that to the right people to build the momentum to have a career. So like minimum is probably going to be like 10 years before anyone who's in this will be able to support themselves in a way where they're making like movies and stuff. Of course, you could take like the YouTube or social media route and then just post a bunch of content online, and you could do that within a year if you're really, really good at it and you put in the time. But in terms of like shorts and movies or like features and stuff like that, the type of content I think us and all the viewers appreciate and would like to make. You're looking at long term, and there's not usually a big break. There's just a bunch of little smaller breaks like that you don't notice necessarily at the time, but then like years down the line you look back and you're like, oh shit, I'm where I wanted to be. This is crazy. Or at least like, oh shit, now it's starting to pay. I can pay rent now with the things that I built. So yeah.
Is there anybody in the like in the future you hope one day to work with, or any particular directors, or across from anybody?
Yeah. I interned at Ghost House and I got to meet Sam Raimi. He's a super cool dude. I
Nice.
would definitely like to work with him at some point. I think he's definitely more on the producer side now. I can't remember the last thing I think maybe he directed one episode of the Evil Dead series, but I think he mostly was on the producer side of that. Um, let's see. I like Christopher Nolan. It'd be nice to work with him at some point. Um, I love all of Jason Bateman's work. I feel like
Oh
he is
yeah.
my spirit animal, so I would like to work with him on pretty much anything he does. Like I like the Arrested Development and then Ozark. I think the Ozarks, that's probably one of my favorite shows of all time. Uh,
Did you ever get a chance to watch The Outsider on HBO?
oh, Oh yeah, was that with the evil the creature that
The
mimicked?
shape shifting
Yeah, yeah.
creature,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
because Jason Bateman was like full on
Mhm,
director in charge of
yeah.
Ozark. Like he was a big force behind that production.
Mhm.
But where he kind of kicked off doing directing and everything was on The Outsider, and
Oh
so
wow.
he's in those first two episodes.
Yeah.
And like the first two episodes, and he does some flashback stuff, but those
Mhm.
first two episodes were Jason Bateman, and he is phenomenal. It's
Yeah.
it's like okay, I just got to play this character for two roles. The arc he gives him in
Mhm.
two episodes,
Yeah.
brilliant, absolutely
Mhm.
brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely one of the better series. Like, and it was so good. It was like, oh no, this guy couldn't be like. You're left guessing. With like, maybe he is a, maybe he did do it. So that was
It's like
definitely,
this is like the dude who's Arrested Development. We remember him
yeah,
from Arrested Development. It's like and that,
uh,
like to yeah, that to and I love him in comedy. Like comedy,
mm,
he's brilliant. But
yeah,
to traverse to the depth of both
mm,
horror and drama, and like
yeah,
that he can portray him and Laura Linney across.
mm,
Oh, brilliant.
yeah,
Another one is and I'm up there with you. Like Christopher Nolan's fantastic. Like Guillermo
mm.
del Toro.
Oh yeah,
I would love to did that imagination. I
mm,
would love to be just to sit in awe of of that and see him work, but to work for him to like give the
mm,
opportunity would be is one of my big inspirations. It's like
yeah,
that and John Carpenter. He's got a huge John Carpenter fan. You know,
yeah, yeah, it'd be fun. Let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to think of. Oh yeah, Eric Kripke. I mean, it'd be cool to work on. They're doing the Supernatural prequel. It'd be cool to work on that. I watched a ton of the Supernatural series. So
oh,
yeah.
I feel kind of bummed telling you because they didn't renew it for second season.
Oh no. Oh damn. Oh wow.
And they were trying to like sell it to either Amazon or Netflix, and neither one
Uh,
of them picked it up,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Well,
Oh,
who
and I was
knows?
bummed when I heard about that because
Yeah. Yeah.
they were going to take that mythology, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, they didn't pick that up. And
Yeah.
Jared is off doing Walker Texas Ranger right
Walker.
now, so
Yeah.
yeah,
So, oh well, who knows? Maybe after the strike, they'll be like, "Fuck it, we're trying to, we'll take it. We want everything now and
we'll take yeah, anything that can come along the
anything."
lines.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
mm.
Well,
Yeah,
man, this has been amazing. Like a trip down memory lane, and
mhm,
like getting into the industry. And I know that a lot of the burgeoning filmmakers and burgeoning actors
mhm,
that listen to the show will have a lot to take away from
mhm,
what you brought up. Before we close out, we got to know is like as far as like horror movies go. Do you
mhm.
have a favorite horror icon? We got to ask this of everybody. Is like, do you have a favorite
Uh,
one that you just love?
you
I think
know,
you can tell who mine is.
yeah,
Because he's
yeah. I think, I've always been. So I guess I'll give two answers. So when I was a kid, I saw Child's Play, like just like 5 minutes of it when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I was fucking scared that Chucky was gonna come kill me. Um, but I really like the original Hellraiser, like Pinhead. I think he's such an iconic character. So I think it would be between Chucky and Pinhead.
Nice.
Those would be my two. I would say. Yeah, yeah, those two. So
Brad Dourif, and Doug Bradley, yeah, because
mm,
those two, I mean, what
yeah,
they brought to it, especially Bradley under Barker's
mm,
direction, and Brad Dourif, just legendary. I've
yeah,
loved him
mm,
for forever. So this has been absolutely amazing. Well, I want to appreciate you coming out, Russell. I've had you here for about an hour and a half,
mm,
and we kind of run over, but this is great. And
yeah,
the stories that help to make up this industry
mm,
are always a blast to hear, and everybody has a different experience. And for
mm,
those who are trying to break into this, it's always important to hear those, to hear like
mm,
those how it's affected us, and
mm,
how it drives pretty much everything we do. So I appreciate
yeah,
everything we had here. This is absolutely
mm,
amazing. So thank you, Russell, for taking the
yeah.
time. This has been great.
I appreciate it. I'm happy to come back anytime. And just for anyone out there, last, I guess, if I can leave anyone with anything, just make shit and put it out there as soon as you can. Get it in some festivals. Don't be afraid of being bad and making mistakes. In fact, if people can see you go from bad to great, it's going to give you more of a following and a story because it's like, it's just like any movie you make, it's except for people get to watch it in real life. So, I would say don't get discouraged. You know, don't worry about being great today. Just work on doing a little bit every day to become successful. You know, down the line, we'll say tomorrow. Don't worry about being good today. Just do what it takes to be better tomorrow. There we go. That's a TikTok right there. So cool. All right.
Like
Well,
don't be the next great someone else. Be the first great you.
yeah, there we go. I
There
like
you
it.
go.
So
Awesome.
cool.
Well, this has been Week in Horror Front Row. I've been here with Russell Coker, talking about the industry and all kinds of great stuff related to the horror genre. And I hope that you enjoyed it out there. So if you're listening to this, wherever you listen to podcasts, definitely check us out. We do this every single month where we sit down with industry professionals to talk about the genre that we love so much. That is the horror genre, the greatest genre that ever was. So once again, a huge thank you to my guest, Russell Coker.
Mm.
Thank you,
Yep.
sir.
Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to come back anytime. So.
Awesome. I have been JL. This has been Front Row, and we will see you all next month.